Let's get rolling on a Monday. Glasses in session. We go to the Glasser guest line and check in with Charlie Potter, who joins the senior team writer for Bama Online for On3 Sports. Give him a follow on X at Charlie_Potter. And Charlie, as you know, it's year 2 of Kellen DeBoer, and obviously last year so much of dealing with moving on from Nick Saban. Players have kind of talked about that adjustment they had to make in year 1. Have you sensed a shift in the program a little bit? Has anything been different from your eyes watching camp and as we get ready for the season in year 2 under Kellen DeBoer?
I don't think it's been like a huge difference in terms of the eye test. Alabama's a very experienced team coming back, and I think really though this is Kalen DeBoer's team now. You've had several transfer portal windows. They've come and gone. Actually, in the spring, after spring practice, Alabama lost 0 scholarship players to the transfer portal. So I think that kind of tells you the buy-in of this program, of these players. And look, I mean, last year, I don't want to say he had to step around on eggshells or anything like that, but in this day and age of college football, with players being able to move around easier than before, you got to keep a roster intact. All these guys now on this roster want to be in Tuscaloosa, want to play for Coach DeBoer and this coaching staff. So I think there's a little bit more buy-in. I think this is a pretty close-knit group. And it sounds like this offseason maybe, and from a workout standpoint, a summer workout standpoint, they've been a little harder on them. It's been a little tough. Some of the guys that have been in the program says it's been one of the hardest of their times in Tuscaloosa. And then they also talk about just, how it's been one of the best. So I think they're saying all the right things for it to be a significant jump in year 2 under Kalen DeBoer. And you look at his last stops, he's kind of done that everywhere he's gone. As year 1 to year 2, you've seen a significant step. So I think a lot of people are encouraged and looking forward to year 2. And based off what the players said, I think they have reason to be.
Well, and as you know, Charlie, all eyes going to be on Ty Simpson certainly this year, as it appears that he's going to be the starting quarterback week 1 against Florida State. He's certainly waited his turn. He's prepared for this moment to take over as the starting quarterback. What have been the early impressions of Ty so far? And is there a quarterback that reminds you that Bama's had in the last 10 years or so, maybe similar traits to what we might see out of Ty this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of reminiscent of Mac Jones. Not necessarily, I'm not saying it's a one-for-one comparison, but you look at the loyalty that Ty's had at this program, waiting his turn and now coming in and having an opportunity. And look, Alabama hasn't publicly named a starting quarterback, but after the spring, Ryan Grubb basically said, if we played a game tomorrow, Ty Simpson would be the starter. And then at SEC Media Days, Kalen DeBoer echoed those sentiments. So you're going into, preseason camp, which starts on July 30th. Alabama's going to have basically a month to prepare for that game at Florida State. There's going to be opportunities for Austin Mack and Keelan Russell to challenge and push him for that number 1 role. But I think at this point it'd be kind of hard to do that. Ty Simpson's going to really have to mess things up. I think it's his job to lose. And I think that's kind of been the narrative all offseason long. He's been the most consistent. He's obviously the most experienced, having played, I think, 6 games each of the last 2 seasons as Jalen Milroe's back up. And he's waited his term, and now he has a prime opportunity in front of him, and it seems like he's taking every advantage of that. So you look at Mac Jones. He came in the same class with Tua Tagovailoa, a bold move right from the jump out of high school, waited his term. And then he had a young promising guy on the roster with him in 2020, and Bryce Young. And I think a lot of people are excited to see Bryce the same way they're excited to see Keelan Russell. But it looks like Ty Simpson is maybe going to hold him off and hold Austin Mack off and be the first guy on the field there in Tallahassee come August 30th.
I think that's a really good comp. And Charlie, Mac Jones that year was thrown to a Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith. And maybe this year Ty Simpson's throwing to one in Ryan Williams. Obviously, he's going to get all the accolades. But outside of Ryan, maybe people who aren't too familiar with this Bama roster, who's another guy in that skill position group that you think could be a top target to Ty this year outside of Ryan Williams?
Well, like this wide receiving core, I know they lost, I think, 6 players to the transfer portal. It's like a 180 from last year. It's in a good spot. And look, I know Ryan deserves every accolade and every recognition that he gets. He's a superstar, but Alabama has some really damn good receivers that aren't named Ryan Williams on this roster. And Jeremy Bernard's one. He's a guy that I think could be a draft pick in a year's time. He actually led the team in receptions last year. Those were your top 2 targets by a wide margin on the 2024 team. And then Isaiah Horton coming in from Miami. He's a guy that knows Ty Simpson. They're both from Tennessee, and I think they went through like the recruiting camp circuit together. And I think a big reason for Isaiah to transfer from Miami to Alabama is that familiarity with Ty Simpson. So he's got a lot of playmakers around him. The running back room is pretty stacked. You don't have a true maybe bell cow. You don't have a Derrick Henry type, but you have, 3 or 4 guys deep there. The tight end room got a boost, after the spring transfer portal window with a couple of guys coming in. But that receiving core is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And honestly, they're probably 7, 8, 9 deep. It's going to be really intriguing to see how many of these guys get on the field because they have a lot of worthy and promising options.
We're talking with Charlie Potter here on Send It In, senior team writer for Bama Online for On3 Sports. Charlie, let's talk about the other side of the ball. Defensively, I think Bama has a chance to be one of the best secondaries in college football this season. What's your outlook of the defense coming into the year? And maybe if there was like an area of weakness or like a question mark that might be a concern, what would that be on the defense?
Yeah, I think they got huge news in January at every level of the defense, just in terms of guys choosing to come back and not enter the draft. You had, I think, 8 seniors on last year's team, 3 guys that turned pro, one of those being Jahad Campbell. But the rest is pretty much back and ready to roll. You've got returning starters at corner, at safety. You've got Deontay Lawson back in the middle of that defense. You got Tim Keenan, LT Overton, Quay Russaw up front. So it's really tough to pick a strength. I think the secondary is probably the way I'd lean. That cornerback room is really special because you've got Damani Jackson and Xavier Brown both back. Those are guys that started all 13 games last year and seemed to make significant strides as the season progressed. And then you bring in a guy like Cam Calhoun from Utah. PFF's huge on Cam Calhoun. They might be his number one fan. And then Dijon Lee, a 5-star corner who's like 6'4". I think he's over 200 pounds now, just a freak in that room. So from a top-loaded and a depth standpoint, you're going to be hard-pressed to find a better position group than Alabama's cornerback room. And from a weakness standpoint, I think that obviously a key component and a key point of emphasis for this defense this year is to get more pressure on the quarterback. I think they finished with 24, 25 sacks last year. I think that was the least since like 2013. So they want to get after the quarterback, and guys like LT Overton, Quay Russaw, some of those guys in the middle like Tim Keenan and James Smith can do that, but they need to do it on a more consistent basis. And really when you look at it, I think it's that outside linebacker room. Quay Russaw is a talented dude. They get Jamarian Latham back for his 6th year. They got some promising young players, but a lot of it's kind of unproven, and those guys need to produce more in terms of just applying pressure on opposing quarterbacks.
Charlie, their schedule, once again, is difficult this year. You keep the same opponents. You just flip home and away. So certainly the game that jumps out at you at Georgia in Athens is going to be a tough one to win. Outside of that game, what was the one on the schedule that you looked at and you're like, that's going to be a tough one for Bama to get the win?
It is the same schedule pretty much. They also had Florida State, so they got 2 Power 5 non-conference games. They start the season on the road at Tallahassee. I'm not saying Florida State is going to be that because I'm interested to see what they look like coming off the 2-10 season. But, I mean, obviously all eyes go to the Georgia game. But there's a lot of revenge games on this schedule. But for me, I think it's that South Carolina game on October 25th because you go to Columbia the week after hosting Tennessee and Tuscaloosa. We know that emotions are going to be high for that 3rd Saturday in October game. So just, what happens going on the road at Columbia, because a lot of people are high on South Carolina. I think rightfully so with Lenore Sellers coming back. I'll be interested to see how they replace some key pieces that left, but they've got a lot of talented young players, and going on the road in South Carolina, Alabama hasn't done it since, I think, 2019. So a different experience for some of those guys, and the way it just falls on the schedule, after a tough October, because you look at it, after that Georgia game, you get Vanderbilt at Missouri, Tennessee, and then at South Carolina. To close that out with the road trip in Columbia is going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then at South Carolina, to close that out with the road trip in Columbia is going to be pretty tough.
Yeah, no doubt. Going to be a tough schedule. Right now, Bama about -175 to make the college football playoff this season. Obviously, they weren't able to do it last year. Charlie, do you think the Tide get back to the playoffs this season?
I think so, because we're sitting there in Norman thinking, okay, they might be playing for an SEC championship game with a win over Oklahoma, and then they just kind of fall flat on their face. So I think 10-2 is realistic. I think they can win 11 games. I think this team can play for not only a trip to the college football playoff, but I think they could play for an SEC championship this season. If they get the quarterback position straightened out, if they get some consistency from that position, if they get consistent play up front of the offensive line, and then they can, they were good at causing turnovers last year. They need to keep that up, but also apply pressure on the quarterback. If all of those things come together with the guys they have coming back and some of the talented newcomers they have, I think Alabama can be right there in the hunt for the college football playoff. Not only that, I think they can get to Atlanta and play for an SEC title.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Year 2 with DeBoer, Ty Simpson taking over at quarterback. He's Charlie Potter, senior team writer for Bama Online for On3 Sports. Give him a follow on X at Charlie_Potter. Charlie, always appreciate the time, man. Enjoy the season. Hope to catch up with you again soon.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, great stuff there from Charlie Potter. Let's continue to preview the Tide here on Send It In as Shawnee Sharp will throw up the schedule there. You guys can see it, right? Life in the SEC. Bama's got a difficult schedule. 2 Power 4 opponents, as Charlie mentioned, the opener at Florida State, and then you get Wisconsin in week 3 as well. An interesting storyline in that Florida State game is you now have Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator for the Seminoles, right? Obviously, Gus was the was the head coach and the OC for Auburn for a number of years. He's no stranger to playing Alabama. And with Florida State coming off a 2-win season, like Charlie was talking about, you get Bama at home in front of your fans. That'll be an interesting game. Their quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, has made a lot of interesting comments. We'll see if his team can back it up, but that's a good season opening game. Again, the game at Georgia is going to be really difficult. We know that since Kirby Smart has taken over as head coach of Georgia, if there is one team that has given him issues, it has been Bama. He's only been able to beat them one time. A lot of those games have come against Nick Saban, but last year DeBoer and Bama was able to beat them. But then, as Charlie was saying, man, it really picks up once you get to Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma, and then, of course, the Iron Bowl this year, which is never, ever easy whenever it's played at the Plains and Auburn. So it'll be a tricky game. I think the win total at 9.5 is totally fair. I think Bama is probably a 9 or a 10-win season. I think you can make the argument for either. You look at last year's team, right? And they lost to Oklahoma as double-digit favorites. They lost to Vanderbilt as 24-point favorites. They win both of those games. They're an 11-win team from last season. So probably going to lose the game to Georgia, probably slip up somewhere else. Maybe it's a South Carolina game. LSU, maybe it's on the road at Auburn potentially. 9-10 wins feels about right. I'm staying away from the win total. I'm staying away from Bama to make the playoff as well. I wouldn't lay juice for Bama to make the playoff. I would go big with Bama this year. We've talked about this a lot. When we're doing a lot of these college football, NFL previews, there are certain teams I like to attack in the regular season, and there are certain teams I like to think big picture. Bama, for me, is a lot like the Los Angeles Rams this season, where I really don't want to do anything regular season with Bama, but just like the Rams, I think their team is good enough to not only win the conference, but they're good enough to win the whole thing. I bet them 15-1 to win the national championship. That's now down to 12-1. They were 5-1 to win the SEC. Now that's down to plus 475. So a lot of people are starting to invest on Alabama this year. And again, their roster, before we hopped on air, Charlie brought up a great point. This is the most seniors that Alabama has had since 2015. So it's a very experienced roster. And at positions where, they have sophomores, it's guys that played the whole season last year. Ryan Williams is going to be a sophomore, played all last year. Those 2 corners that Charlie was talking about, Jackson and Brown, they played all last year. So Bama's team is going to be experienced, and even their underclassmen guys got some experience playing last year with DeBoer and playing on defense or on offense. So it's going to be a really good roster. They're going to have a difficult schedule. We talked about how a lot of these SEC teams might be at a disadvantage because they have to play tougher games on their schedule than some of these ACC or Big 10 or Big 12 teams. But if there is a team equipped out of the SEC to handle their schedule and then win 4 more games and win a national championship, it certainly could be Alabama. And then Ty Simpson, we've talked about him many times on this show. How about the fact his Heisman Trophy price was 66-1? It's all the way down to 20-1 now on BetMGM. It just never made sense at that price. With the offensive weapons that he has, with the receiving core, DeBoer is your head coach, Ryan Grubb now back as the OC, and Ty Simpson's waited his turn. I think the Mac Jones comp is a good one. He had Devontae Smith. Ty Simpson has Ryan Williams. So it'll be interesting. None of us know how good Ty is, obviously, but it's 66-1. I think it was worth a flyer at 20-1. Probably not as great a price, but definitely a Heisman candidate, especially if Bama puts up a lot of points and if they are in the national, or if they're in the hunt to win the SEC. And then the last thing, Kellen DeBoer. We've talked about on this show, I like Nebraska because of Matt Rule and what he does in year 3. How about Kellen DeBoer and what he does in year 2? His last 2 coaching stops with Sioux Falls in year 2, he won a national championship, and then with Washington in year 2, he went to the national championship. It doesn't take DeBoer long. Replacing a legend in Nick Saban, they did some good things. They obviously had some moments they'd like to have back, but now it's his team. It's his team. It's his program. I think the guys recognize that. I think Bama's going to have a good year. So keep an eye on them. I think there's still some value at 12-1 on them to win the national championship. I think they're going to have one of the best rosters this year in college football.